All right, Melissa.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us, Mickey. Lindsay really covered a lot of what I wanted to ask, but I guess I do have a question, and it's more possibly your opinion than fact or something you can definitely share. But and I know we've talked a lot about the hostages in Gaza, but for me, on a personal and emotional level, it's just been a really tough year. And I think what strikes me as different about that situation is that in most of the other hostage situations, we sort of know where the hostages are, right? And in this case, you've got babies, right? The youngest hostage was under a year when he was taken. And you've got senior citizens who I think are in their 80s. And do we even think we know where they all are? Like, that's just something that has always weighed on my mind.
Yeah, so yeah, it's been, look, the Gaza situation is unique on so many levels. The sheer numbers, it's not unique because we had the girls in Boko Haram in Nigeria, which was a similar number, but well, for me personally, of course, because it's my people, it's very, very different. It's the soldiers are from units that I served in, um, uh, but these negotiations were under conditions of war as well. That also never happened before. And Hamas is certainly not in the business of letting us know who's alive and who's dead. It's like what's the Schrodinger's cat? You put a cat in a box and you leave it for a year, and as long as you don't open the box, the cat is both alive and dead. That's exactly what Hamas is doing with this, because the value of the hostages for them when they're unknown is greater. There are instances in which the intelligence community knows where people are, and they try to figure out risks in trying to take them. There was some heroic rescue missions that led to the release, at least five hostages that were released alive through these. Unfortunately, I know of at least 20 that were killed in these attempts. I look at the numbers and I argue with everything I can, even when one of these rescues released a hostage named Noah. And my daughter's name is Noah. And I was very close to Noah's, not her family because her mother was very sick, but it was her close friends that were working with me on this. And I was so emotional with her military rescue. But I also argued at the same time, it's going to cost dearly because it's going to cost lives of other hostages. Because as soon as you put on the table the threat that some of these hostages can be released in a military operation, the guards of the rest of the hostages, when the dog barks at night, will kill the hostage. Because if you look at the prisoner's dilemma or any basic game theory, the worst for them is the hostage being rescued alive. The best for them is a deal. The in between, the Nash equilibrium for that on game theory is kill the hostage. And we know that happened as a result of that. That's kind of what one of the American hostages were killed specifically for that. And that's devastating. But also you look at the numbers and you realize like we got 107 of them in a deal and we got 5 of them in a military operation. Tell me which one is more effective. But again, there's things like the Bibas family. You mentioned the babies, Kfir, and his brother, and Shir, his mom, and Yarden, his dad, who's still in captivity. Hamas went to a very extreme lengths earlier to convince the Israelis that they're dead. Not Yarden, not the father, but the mother and the kids. The Bibas family it's a tribe. Like I work with, there are 20 of them that I'm in touch with, and they're all over the place on this. Of course, it's traumatizing. And there was a point that I actually thought that Hamas might have been pushing that narrative, not because they're indeed dead, but because they wanted Israel to move away or move on from them because they were with Sinwar. And they didn't want to release them because there was operational risk for them to release them or move them because that will tell where Sinwar is. So I was holding hope for that. I don't know what happened with Sinwar's killing because he was not with hostages, despite what the common knowledge was. but again, for Hamas to go to such length to convince the Israelis that this specific family is dead, there was something else about it. And this was at the time where Israel demanded that all the kids and the women will be released, non-soldiers, and Hamas wanted to move on into the next categories. So it's a long way of saying there's some places that we know, and the IDF tries not to engage there militarily when it's high risk, but in many cases we don't. And there was just a video released this week of Hamas citing and claiming a lot of hostages that were killed in IDF operations. This morning I was dealing with the Siegel family a lot. Keith Siegel is an American. He's one of the elderly men held. His wife Aviva was released on day 51. We worked on them because in that video, they make reference by picture to him as if he was killed, but there is no stating that he was killed. And you can imagine the trauma that causes the family and trying to deal, because we haven't had a proof of life from him since April.